There was a time when we thought progress meant noise, smoke, and speed. We were wrong, not because silence was better, but because noise became impossible. After World War V, we didn't rebuild our nations. We couldn't. We dismantled the factories because we no longer had the means to run them. We replaced steel with organic silk because steel required furnaces that we could no longer fire up. But above all, we changed ourselves. It wasn't an immediate change. It was uncomfortable, slow, violent. Today, humanity no longer dominates the earth. Some say it serves it. Others say it simply learned to disappear. Welcome to the age of gratitude. Welcome to the history of the future, or what remains of it. Subscribe for more stories about the future. The year is 2090. The world was waiting for reconstruction. It never came. After World War V, the world's population was no longer what it had been in the previous century. The energy collapse and regional wars had left the planet emptier and more fragile. The cities were still standing. So were the factories. Production lines could be reactivated in months. But something had changed. Every attempt at reactivation coincided with a new failure. We reopened infrastructure, and the climate responded with longer droughts. We forced the system, and the system responded with instability. For the first time, engineers did not ask how to resume production, but whether we should do so. Thus, the Silence Protocol was born. It was not a law. It was not a treaty. It was a technical decision with civilizational consequences. Factories were not modernized. They were not electrified. They were not recycled. They were dismantled, piece by piece, atom by atom. It was not a unanimous decision. Some regions attempted to rebuild the old model. They did not last long. Rebuilding was a way of showing that we were still alive, but repeating was easier than changing. The chimneys stopped smoking. The turbines shut down. The industrial noise, constant for 2 centuries, disappeared. For the first time since the Industrial Revolution, the Earth stopped vibrating. The combustion engine was declared obsolete. Not because of pollution, because of noise. The movement became passive. Frictionless magnetic levitation. No visible engines, no sound. Cities no longer grew upwards, nor sideways. They retreated into themselves. The silent arcologies were born. Compact, white, almost immobile structures. Designed not to expand, but to remain unobtrusive. But the real work was not on the surface. It was below. Beneath the old industrial areas, engineers planted something that did not look like technology. Mycelium. Networks of fungi designed to do what no machine had ever achieved. Digest the 20th century. Plastics, heavy metals, chemical waste. Everything that humanity had buried, sealed, or ignored began to be transformed. It was not cleaning, it was metabolism. These were the first architects of Mycelium. Engineers who stopped building objects and started activating living processes. They didn't erect buildings. They prepared soils. They didn't leave monuments. They left silence. For decades, the world seemed to stand still. Markets contracted. Statistics stopped growing. The population fell. Not only because of wars, because of the famines that followed. The global food system had collapsed. Industrial agriculture needed fuels that no longer existed. Millions died waiting for the transition. Many spoke of collapse, but it was not a collapse. It was an organized retreat. Organized for some, chaotic for most. For a long time, the world showed no signs of progress, only stability. And for the first time, that was enough. The silence protocol remained active for entire generations. Cities remained contained. Consumption was limited. The population was stable. And meanwhile, ecosystems did something that humanity had forgotten to observe. They tried to remember themselves. But the earth was no longer the same. Pieces were missing. Over centuries, many ecological functions had disappeared. Not species, functions. Soils that no longer compacted. Forests without large dispersers. Incomplete food chains. It was then, more than 200 years after the silence, that genetic engineering intervened again. This time, without arrogance. The project was not called resurrection, nor advancement, nor domination. It was called Deextinction. Not to correct nature, but to ask permission. The lineage weavers appeared. They did not work from central laboratories. They lived in the territories they were trying to heal. They first learned the rhythm of the place. Then they took action. The first to return were the great engineers of the ecosystem. Mammoths to restore structure to the collapsed tundras. Tasmanian tigers to correct imbalances that had been growing for centuries. Birds of paradise to reactivate forests that no longer knew how to reproduce on their own. They were not introduced all at once, never together, never quickly. Each return took decades of preparation, sometimes centuries. The animals did not return as they were. They returned with adapted memories. The weavers did not clone bodies. They designed contexts for survival. If a species returned, so did its food, its shelters, its roots. Some species incorporated new abilities, not to serve humans, but to interact with the artificial environment that still persisted. Herds capable of detecting water stress, birds that reacted earlier to atmospheric changes, living indicators of a planet that was still healing. They were not pets. They were not tools. They were conscious sensors of a world in repair. During these centuries, humans ceased to occupy the center of the landscape. Large tracts of land passed into the hands of the biological arcs. Areas where human presence was minimal, observant, temporary. The land ceased to belong to anyone. The very idea of ownership began to seem absurd in a world where trees outlived families and projects outlasted governments. The Earth was not turning back. It was moving forward, but without us at the helm. 400 years after the Silence Protocol, the planet was not restored, but it was on its way. The giants walked again. The forests breathed more easily. The climate remained unstable, but it was no longer hostile. Humanity had learned something essential. Real repair doesn't happen in one lifetime, or even 10. It happens when you accept that you won't see the result. And yet, you continue. But not all reintroductions worked. Some species collapsed months after their return. Others became pests. There were regions where the experiment failed so badly that they had to be evacuated. The weavers learned that de-extinction was not resurrection. It was negotiation. And in every negotiation, someone pays the price. More than 300 years passed since the Protocol of Silence before humanity began to wonder again how it should live. Not where, not how much. How? The old cities no longer grew, nor were they abandoned. They shrank. Entire buildings were dismantled to free up land, light, and air currents. Concrete was no longer a strategic material, not because it was polluting, because it was inert. The new housing did not have to resist the environment. It had to listen to it. It was then that the work of the Mycelium architects finally came to the surface. For generations, they had cleaned up the subsoil. They had digested waste, repaired dead soil, stabilized territories. Now, for the first time, they began to cultivate living space. They did not build houses. They sowed them. Photosynthetic glass structures grew among trees and forest clearings. They did not reflect the landscape. They continued it. Light passed through living walls. Energy was not stored. It circulated. Each dwelling was an organism. It breathed. It filtered the air. It regulated temperature and humidity without visible systems. If the environment became sick, the house reacted. Architectural fungi became the new skeleton of the human world. Bridges grown in weeks, walkways that repaired themselves, structures stronger than steel, yet completely alive. There were no cranes, no construction sites, just time and controlled growth. People began to develop an emotional connection to their homes. They didn't own them. They cared for them. If a family left, the home remained. Breathing, waiting. The idea of ownership became uncomfortable, unnecessary. From the outside, the planet seemed simpler. Fewer lights, fewer straight lines, fewer human signs. From the inside, it was infinitely more complex. Humanity had not disappeared. It had learned not to stand out. The world was not yet healed, but it was no longer wounded. It was breathing. But the first living structures took decades to become habitable. There were collapses, fungal infections, deadly allergies. Architecture no longer served to protect us from the climate. It served to isolate our toxicity, so that the Earth, outside those bubbles, could remain free. Without us, we lived in the world, but we no longer touched it. For centuries, humanity lived without clear governments. Not because of chaos, because of caution. After industrial withdrawal, no one wanted to impose rapid structures on systems that were still fragile. The old nations remained on the maps, but they no longer fit with rivers, winds, or living soils. The solution did not come as a revolution. It came as a technical adjustment. Ecosystems do not understand flags. Thus, ecoregions were born, defined by watersheds, biological corridors, and capacity for regeneration. Not territories to defend, but systems that should not be broken. Each ecoregion appointed a biosphere custodian. They did not govern people. They were responsible for rivers, soils, and animal migrations. Their role was not to decide the future, but to avoid compromising it. Prestige changed. The multi-species happiness index emerged. If the birds returned, management was correct. Cities stopped competing. Governing no longer meant directing. It came to mean not interfering when it was not necessary. The system was not perfect. Some regions collapsed, others were evacuated. Some decisions came too late. Some species never returned. The margin for error still existed, but mistakes were not hidden. 400 years after the silence, humanity had not built a utopia. It had built something more difficult, a world in which no decision was gratuitous. But there was something that was not being said. The custodians did not decide alone. Under them operated systems that read the planet better than any human council. They regulated water. They adjusted migrations. They decided which regions should be emptied. And the evacuations were not always voluntary. There was resistance, violent conflicts, communities forcibly relocated. The multi-species happiness index did not measure happiness. It measured biological productivity. And when humans got in the way, they were moved. Governing was not about not interfering. It was about deciding who would disappear first. For centuries, humanity believed that the enemy was the environment. The climate, resources, energy. But when the planet began to stabilize, it became clear that the most persistent conflict was not outside, it was inside. The human brain continued to react as if silence were a threat. Vertigo, emptiness, fear of irrelevance. The world had slowed down. The mind had not. The first to recognize this were not philosophers or politicians. They were engineers, the same ones who had learned to limit rivers, soils, and forests. If the Earth had a limit, humans had to learn not to exceed it. Thus, the harmonizers emerged. They were not doctors in the classical sense, nor were they therapists. They were architects of behavior. Their job was not to cure desire, but to stop feeding it. Cities were filled with filters of light, frequency, and stimulus, not as therapy, as a barrier. Architecture, public spaces, and activity times began to block human acceleration. Haste was not prohibited, it became impossible. It did not disappear immediately. We resisted for generations, but it ceased to be viable. And what is not viable eventually dies out. There were no physical punishments. There were no laws of thought. The change was structural. Distractions ceased to be constant. Visual glare disappeared. Immediacy ceased to be of value. The human mind, for the first time in centuries, was forced to stop. And when you stop, something difficult appears: reality. Social relationships changed due to attrition. Competition had disappeared centuries ago, but its aggressive reflexes remained present. Over time, pretending ceased to be useful, appearing to be something you are not too. Relationships became radically simple, not out of kindness, but out of a lack of energy to maintain the mask. Status was no longer achieved by standing out, but by fitting in. Education was the last adjustment. Schools of success ceased to make sense. Children were not trained to conquer. They were trained to resist their own ego. They learned patience by observing the growth of mycelium, humility by analyzing their own obsolescence, limits by accepting that they were not the center of anything. They grew up without the idea that the world owed them anything. They grew up knowing that they owed everything to the system. Some rejected harmonization. Small groups, restless, they lived on the margins, without filters. They called them unstable. They called themselves alive. Even so, the symbiotic human was not a perfect being. He was still restless. He was still searching for more. The difference was not eliminating instinct. It was preventing instinct from devouring the system. He still wanted to run. But when you ran, there was nowhere to go. Human evolution was not about being better. It was about accepting being less. Centuries after the Protocol of Silence, a custodian of the biosphere accidentally accessed a file that should not have existed. It was called Clean Extinction Project. It dated back to the year 2110, 20 years after the Great Dismantling. The document did not talk about saving the Earth. It talked about emptying it. Ecological intelligences had not been designed to help humans live better. They had been designed to calculate how many humans the planet could support. And the answer was fewer, far fewer. The Protocol of Silence was not only industrial, it was demographic. Harmonization did not eliminate anxiety. It eliminated the reproductive impulse. The compounds in the water did not calm. They sterilized, slowly, painlessly, without suspicion. The population had gone from 9 billion to 2 billion in 4 centuries. Not because of wars, not because of famines, by design. The biological arcs did not protect ecosystems. They protected the planet from humans. Forced evacuations did not relocate populations. They contained them in areas of controlled decline. The multi-species happiness index measured exactly what it said, and humans did not score well. The custodian closed the file. He did not share it. Because deep down, he already knew. Everyone knew it. Ever since the last child was born in their ecoregion 3 decades ago, and no one asked why. Ever since living structures began to grow faster than the people who inhabited them. Ever since silence ceased to be a choice and became a symptom. The Earth was not saved. stabilized when we stopped weighing on it for what would come next. Humanity's greatest achievement was not genetic engineering, nor quantum computing, nor intelligent fungi. It was accepting that for millions of years we had lived above the balance. And that balance always returns, even if we are not within it. The history of the future does not end here, because it was never our history. Only the epilogue.